and away we go. All right, so the thing with the podcasting is just a record of whatever happens in this particular room. If you go to university, podcasting is just a normal part of uni. All right, a lot of people don't even go to lectures; they just go straight to a podcast and listen to a lecture online. So anyway, for you guys, this is where we are. What we need to do for you is we need to first of all give you a bit of a focus of what's actually happening for you this year. Now, in terms of this first term, these sessions are for you pretty important, all right? Because these sessions will be, first of all, none of the stage ones will be in this session. Okay, they won't be here; they'll be doing their own thing. So we get to sort of like have more of a chat kind of session instead of me standing at the board talking and 20 people being here. Also, you'll actually be able to get the information instead of sort of like having lots of people talking and me having to stop, which means that for you it's a much better year in terms of finding out what you need to find out. These first couple of sessions that we're doing is really terminology based, because I find that and looking at the exams that you guys did last year, and you guys haven't done one yet, but what I found is that there's kind of like a big gap in your understanding of the terminology and what it actually means. Even though you have a basic idea, you still don't have a really clear idea of terminology. And for you guys, you need to know your terminology. Every subject has terminology that goes with the subject. If you understand the terminology and you start using it from the beginning, then everything gets a lot easier in terms of subject because you understand what someone's saying. So having your definitions makes a big difference to the way that you answer your questions and to the way that you work with your knowledge. Now, I know that not all of you guys will be going on stage 3 next year, but we need to get you through the exams this year, all right? And because you're not doing stage 3, are you, next year? But you don't know. You are. Yeah. But you may or may not be, because you may or may not be here. So, yeah, whatever. Okay, let's get started. First of all, you've got to understand that drama is divided into a kind of like an understanding of not only what we call acting, but also what we call space. All right? Now, the thing about acting has a lot of things that go with acting, and a lot of what we would call aspects of acting, if you like to say that. There's certain things that go with being an actor, right? And a lot of them have to do with specific types of things, such as if you're looking at a text, just what exactly is the character's place in the text. So role for a character, what their role is really significant in terms of how you view a character. If you don't really get role, you might want to take notes here, you might not want to take notes here. If you don't really get role, then you don't really understand just why the character's there. No character exists in a text just for something to do. Every character exists in a text for a specific reason. They're there because they perform a function. Now, when you look at role, that breaks into a lot of different things. When you start looking at a character's role, you start looking at things such as the obstacles that a character faces in the text. You start looking at what we call the status of a character in the text. We start looking at what's called the objective of a character in the text. We start looking at just what type of character that character is in the text. All right, these are one of the more critical things. Now, when we look at obstacles, and this is the thing I find that actually we'll start with. I think it's probably best to start with status. When you look at a character's status in a text, status is not just about whether they're a dominant character or a submissive character. So, in other words, it's not whether they're whether they are sort of more in charge of people or less in charge of people. You want to put it that way. It's also a case of just exactly what function they perform in that particular text. And in terms of that function, just how exactly does that relate to other characters? So, for example, if your character is a mother in a text, and she's a mother whose children are all very wayward and very having difficult lives in the text, then what's really her role? Okay, what's her status? Her status is, okay, first of all, occasionally she can be dominant as a mother, but occasionally she can be submissive. So in terms of that, that will change. But also, you have to think, well, you know, what other aspects of status work for her? You know, she has, her job is really to hold things together, if that's what the play is about. Let's say the play is about her and the difficulties they face. Her job is to hold things together. So in terms of her status is really her status becomes really important in the text because she is the linchpin. She's like the glue that binds everyone together. And even though she has fights with people and all sorts of stuff that may happen in a text, she still is the person that will hold it together. So in terms of her status in the text, it's essential to the actual text. So that's just an example of what status is like. So if you're looking at a script excerpt, for example, and you're looking at 2 characters speak or 3 characters speak, and you're looking at the status of each character in the thing, you really have to look at what we call the subtext. And the subtext is underlying. What is going on in the actual script, the little script section that you look at. What exactly is each character doing, and what role they perform? What's their function there? Once you can work out what the function is, then you start working out really, you know, in terms of status, what their status is, and then you understand their role in the text. Does that make sense to people? Right? I mean, I'm trying to be really quite simple here because it's not a difficult concept to grasp. So that's status, and status is something that you need to know, and it's something that you need to know from the minute that you read a text. So you guys have read face-to-face, yes? Right, so you're going to need to really look at the status of each character in face-to-face. And we're going to be looking at that in tutorial when we actually start going through it. And you didn't read it, Jenny?
Face-to-face.
Did you take the book home?
Conversation.
Yeah.
It was like 40.
No, I said read the whole book.
No, you said,
you said read the whole book if you want.
Alright, my bad. We have to read face-to-face. Alright? But don't worry about it. You'll read the conversation. So that'll give you a background to the idea of TJ conferencing, which is what we're going to be looking at. But you need to read face-to-face. I mean, it's not very long. It's only about 20 pages, 30 pages. So it's not long. So could you please make a note to yourselves to read face-to-face? You guys don't have to read it. Lucky you. All right? Okay? Your text this year is, for you this term, is Rome, Sweet Rome. All right, so status. Do we get status? Yeah? We get that? That's a pretty simple thing to understand. All right. The character's objective in the actual text. Now, as an actor, if you don't understand why the character is there and what they're trying to achieve, so you're not actually really going to understand just exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Every character tries to achieve something in a text. Okay, if it's a minor role, it may just be, you know, if they work in a fish and chip shop, it might just be to keep a sell something to somebody in the actual play. That might be if they're just a minor role and that's their thing, then that might be their entire objective, to sell fish and chips. All right. But when your characters are a lot more complex in terms of their roles in the text, their objectives become a little bit more important, okay, than just, you know, something really simple and something really obvious. And when you're dealing with objectives, remember, an objective is broken into 2 types. What we call the scene objective. So what's a character's objective in the scene? And then what's called the super objective, which is what the character wants to achieve by the end of the play. Okay? So there's 2 types of objectives. The scene objective, you know, which is just your normal character objective, and then your super objective, which is what the character wants to do by the end of the text. Now, every character has a super objective. Okay? Obviously, you only know that by reading the entire text. All right? You guys sure you don't want to take notes?
Take some after you finish talking.
Really? Well, mate, we're talking for 45 minutes. Yeah, I know. No. This is the situation. When we do theory sessions, I talk, you take notes. So what I do, I give you a lot of information. This is the only time that we do it. Okay. The rest of the week is more about the work that you have to do. But this is our theory session. You're lucky you're not doing tutorials. These guys all have to do tutorials. You know, twice a week. That's how we get through the course. Anyway, so the character's scene objective, and then the character's super objective. Now, if you're looking at a scene objective, let's say 2 characters are arguing in a text. Okay, what's the objective of each character? Usually when there's an argument, each character is trying to convince the other character that they're right, and they're trying to say to the other character that they're wrong or they got the situation wrong. So it's very simple to say, well, in this particular case, the objective of each character is to win the argument and prove the other character wrong. So that's really a simple situation. If we go back to the mother, right, and the play, a fictitious play about her and her difficult family. Let's say that she has a scene with a drunk husband, right, and the drunk husband comes in and she says, you've tried to find work. And, he's lying and saying, oh, yeah, I've tried to find work, I've been going at it all day, and the whole scene's about that. And, her objective in that particular scene is to try to convince him that he needs to get a job, and his objective in that scene would be to continue to lie and to continue to buy more time so that he doesn't have to do anything, that he can just drift off again. Yes?
So it's literally like scene objective and super objective. It's like really straightforward. So the scene is just what's happening in the scene. Other ones
And
just
super
like
objective what's happening in the whole play. Because every character starts a play here and ends somewhere here. If we're looking at this fictitious play about a mother and her family, if her each scene objective is obviously to deal with members of the family, let's say, right? Okay, and to try and find a way through. But her super objective might be that her whole super objective is to hold the family together and to try to bring them along and make their lives better by the end of the play. Okay, that would be her super objective, right? And I said you only get that by reading the entire play. And for example, in Rome, Sweet Rome, those of you who have read it and started to read it, we'll use that as an example. If you look at Littlest Wimpus and what his objective is for a scene and what his super objective is for the play. I mean, obviously, his super objective for the play is the fact that he doesn't want to be a gladiator and he wants to be married to Purina, I think it is. All right, so that's his super objective, and he wants to come back from England alive. That's always a good thing. So he wants to survive being a gladiator. That's kind of like his super objective. All right, but his objective per scene depends on whether he's in the scene, will depend on what's actually going on in the scene. So, in the scene where he goes to see Boadicea in England, then his objective for that scene is to not get killed, right? And to try and quell, Boadicea. That's obviously not going to work. That was his objective, but it didn't quite work. So you understand objective, all right? Okay, it's all pretty simple, but it's part of the definition, it's part of the terminology. Then we move to what's called obstacles. Now, obstacles are what stops characters getting their objectives, or achieving their objectives. So things that stand in the character's way. So, for example, if we use Littlest Wimpus and his desire in the scene to quell, to take down Boadicea, right? The thing, what's stopping him is her. She's the obstacle. That's not really going to happen. There's simply not enough of them to actually take down Boadicea. All right, so that's his obstacle in that particular text. In terms of Littlest Wimpus's obstacles through the entire play, obviously his objective is to kind of make it through the gladiator school and to marry Purina. His obstacles in the play are the fact that Nero wants him to go to Britain, Tartina wants him to fight Colossus, right? Venus is trying to keep him on the island, Boadicia's going to kill him. All the possible obstacles that he faces to achieve what he wants to do at the end of the text. So that's a pretty simple view of what objective and obstacle is. But that is something that you need to maintain in your head. Now, like super objective, right, there's an objective for the character over text. Obstacles exist for a character throughout the text. And it's not usually one obstacle. There's usually a series of obstacles that a character faces through a text that stops them achieving what they want to achieve, especially when they're a main character. Now, obstacles can be really big, or obstacles can be quite small. It's just really dependent on exactly what is actually going on. An obstacle could be for a character simply not having enough money in his pocket to buy a bottle of milk. Right? That becomes an obstacle to him wanting to buy a bottle of milk in a scene. All right? So obstacles don't need to be massive. They don't need to be huge. They just need to be understood that they're actually there. All right? So that's what an obstacle is. Then we move to the character type. Now, what we're going to do with you guys, so just bear with us, is we're going to be explaining what's called the two types of theatre, which is representation, presentational type.
Good
Yeah.
luck.
That actually isn't hard to understand. It's
I
for
know,
some
but
reason
we
you
went
still
through
don't
it
get it.
so long.
We did, but it's the two styles of theatre which basically encompass what theatre is. You have a representational style of theatre and a presentational style of theatre. When your representational style of theatre is a basic idea for you guys, it means that you're trying to represent something in society. So a person, a thing, whatever. With representational theatre, everything is realistic, right? It's got to appear real, you know. Whereas in presentational theatre, you're trying to present an idea, which is a little bit different. That means that you don't need to be realistic. It doesn't need to be authentic. You can dress any way you want. You can do whatever you want. Whatever it takes to present that idea to an audience, you can do. So one type of theatre, representational theatre, that one really requires you to be authentic in terms of your costuming, authentic, you know, in terms of your set. So it really does look like whatever you're trying to... Sorry? Well, that's when we get to the next thing, which is naturalism, but we're not going to go there today. All right, I want to go that deep today. All right, so, for example, if I'm going to produce a play about, you know, what's going on in this room, I would need to dress you all as Greenwood Senior High School students, and I would need to present this room as best as I possibly could on stage, as authentically as I could, because that's representation. I'm representing this. Whereas in presentational theatre, I don't really need to do that. If I'm trying to present like an idea from this room, I can present an idea about something. Let's say that I'm a tiresome teacher, that I'm extremely boring. All right, that's what I'm trying to present to the audience. Then you guys just need to appear to be students. So you might all wear black, or you know, like you might wear a cap, you might wear a T-shirt that says Greenwood. You know, you might wear something else. You know, just symbolic items that sort of say, hey, you know, this character's from a school. You know, they may walk in with little checkered skirts, but you know, whatever else they want to wear, and that would then we'd say, okay, they look like school students. But they don't have to actually dress completely like a school student. And then the set doesn't really have to be an accurate set of this classroom. Yes. Yes, you may. You know, we might just put a couple of desks and an empty stage. Okay, and then we get the idea that it's a classroom, but it's not a classroom. Most of the work that we do down in the drama room, whenever we're doing a set, it tends to be a presentational set because we never have the money to produce a really authentic set, a realistic set. So a piece of theatre can be representational and can be presentational. You know, like it doesn't have to be strictly one or strictly the other. They can, you know, intermingle. But you know, we'll talk more about that later. But in terms of type, that does really affect the character that you're going to be, because if you're a representational character, then you're trying to be as realistically accurate in terms of your portrayal of the character as you possibly can be. All right, so you are going to do everything that you possibly can to look and speak exactly like that character, and you're not going to do anything unusual in terms of the way that you act, because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to represent that particular person. So if you're going to represent a school student, you're going to dress exactly like a school student, you're going to speak exactly like a school student, you're going to react exactly like a school student. The most important thing about this type of acting, about representational type of acting, is that you don't acknowledge the audience. Okay? The audience is there, but it's not really, it's what we call the fourth wall. Now, you guys all know about the fourth wall. You guys probably don't, but you might do. A fourth wall, the imaginary fourth wall, let's say this is looking down on your stage. There's an entrance, right? There's an entrance, there's your set, there's your characters, right? They're standing there. There's your audience, there's an eyeball. They're looking at you. This wall doesn't really exist. It's what we call the imaginary fourth wall, okay? So in other words, it's like saying that the audience isn't really there. We're acting to each other. Even though we may turn to the audience, we're not actually dealing with the audience. Okay, we don't want them to acknowledge. We don't really care whether they acknowledge us or not. We're representing something. Okay, and in that case, it has to be as realistic as it possibly can be. Whereas in presentational drama, there's no such thing as a fourth wall. This style of staging is irrelevant. You can produce it any way you want. Obviously, you may have an entrance, but this could just be an open stage, right? As long as you might come on from here, where you come on from is reasonably irrelevant. The audience is usually in the same place, but in this particular case, the actor will speak directly to the audience. In presentational theatre, they tend to do that. They tend to acknowledge the audience and talk to the audience and ask their opinion. They don't really want their opinion, but they'll ask their opinion. If you look at stand-up comedy, for example, that's very presentational. Okay? All right, they're not really being a character for an entire thing, but they are presenting characters. You know, and that's, you know, a lot of comedians do that. So that's very presentational when you look at that. So that's a good example. Whereas if a comedian was doing realistic portrayal, it'd be more like, you know, Thank God You're Here, where they're not really too concerned about the audience. They're really just concerned about the scene and what's going on in the scene. So that particular style of performance is going to affect your character type. Now, your character type, there's a lot of things to consider about a character, whether the character is a dynamic character or whether the character is static. Now, if a character is dynamic, it means the character changes and does things in the text. A static character, it means the character really does very little and pretty much goes nowhere, right? In that, and especially if it's in a scene. Right, that character starts a scene somewhere, they don't really have much of an objective in the scene, there's not a lot of obstacles to that character, that's what we call a static character. There's no real emotional change in that character. By the way, if a character changes emotion in a scene, that's considered dynamic and it's also considered developing. Because that's the other thing about a character, it's a type of character, what we call developing character. Right? So the character develops. Now, for a character to be a developing character, they just need to change. Right? So if I'm in a scene and I'm scared at the beginning of the scene, and by the end of the scene I'm happy, I've developed, I've changed. Right? I'm dynamic, I'm not static. You know, because everybody understands the meaning of the word static, yeah? Static is something that does, you know, just stays there, it doesn't do anything, yeah? So it's pretty obvious, but dynamic means something occurs, static means very little occurs. So for example, if I'm doing a scene where I'm a bank teller, right? And I'm just a minor character, right? And someone comes in and I say, how would you like that? And they say, I'd like that in 100 cents. So here you go, thank you. Not much is going on in terms of that character. It's a very static character. But if I was a minor character, if I was a bank teller and someone came in, you know, put hundreds in a bag and I go, yes, and I go, hang on a sec, what are you talking about? And they pull out a gun and then I react, then I'm a developing character, I'm not static, I'm dynamic, things are going on with me, right? So that's the clear difference between those two things. So in terms of your understanding of acting, of actors, these are the four headings, I guess, that you really need to consider more than anything else. Okay? I'm covering this today because we're going to start from go. We're going to start talking in terms of this terminology and this way of speaking from the beginning. So when I say, look, this character's dynamic, this is what's going on in the text, their status here is, so you guys understand what I'm talking about from day one, not like what's he talking about in terms of status, so I have no idea what he means by status. Alright, so, okay, now the other thing I dealt with is this, space, the final frontier. Yeah, sorry, it's a little bit like that.
It's just because it's Monday morning.
I know, but yeah, Monday morning is actually the best time to do this because it's the moment when you're at your most pliable. It's kind of like you haven't had, everybody's quiet on a Monday morning, whereas by Tuesday we're all climbing the walls. Okay, space. Now this is the other big thing for you guys, an understanding of space, right? Because space involves everything from movement to stage. All right, and space tends to be on a lot of different levels. Okay, so for example, if we consider an actor's space, all right, we aren't just considering the space that they're occupying. Okay, we're not just talking about where they're standing in the area around them. That would be a mistake. We're also talking about, in terms of space, we're talking about head space for a character, for a person, for an actor. Okay? head space is really important because what they say about space, they're talking about what, and you know, I'll use the solar system as an example. If we just talk about space and just say, oh look, it's this big empty thing, then we'd actually be, we wouldn't be accurate because space is full of planets, it's full of satellites, it's asteroids, it's got all this stuff going on, all right? So if you consider an actor's head space like space, then you realise an actor isn't just some dumb automated thing with nothing going on. An actor has a lot of stuff in their head. So their brain is what we call dynamic because there's always something going on. Now, and this is an important thing to consider, if you're looking at headspace and you're looking about what a character, you know, what goes on in a character's head, then you start to understand why characters find it difficult sometimes to approach a particular character and be able to act that character because of the stuff that they have going on in their head. A lot of it is called personal baggage. For want of a better term. Okay? A lot of it's called personal baggage. An actor brings a lot of baggage to anywhere. You know, it's just like, because we're all people, we all bring baggage, right? We all have stuff going on in our lives, you know, and that's important to consider when you think about an actor. If you can look at it like that, then you start to also think, well, what about the character? An actor has a lot of stuff going on in their headspace. What does the character have going on in their headspace? What baggage does the character bring to this particular play? All right, so actors have stuff going on in their headspace, characters have had stuff going on in their headspace. So there's a space for you. There's also another space, and what we call backstage. The backstage is a space, all right? And what goes on backstage, you know, is just as important as what goes on stage, especially for actors. Because backstage, this space here allows actors to do things like prepare. You know, it allows actors to discuss. Right? It allows actors to check their scripts. You know, backstage space is just as important as on-stage space. More work goes on backstage than often what goes on stage. You know, I mean, you guys know, if you've been in a play, and all of you have been in a play, how often people pick up their scripts backstage and they're going through their scripts before they have to go on stage. That's part of the preparation. That's part of, you know, I mean, we're not supposed to discuss backstage, but obviously before a show there's plenty of talk going on, and professional actors tend to do a lot of talk about play, you know, what's going on with this scene, what we're doing here, and all that sort of stuff. And you guys do too at times when you're not eating chips and going bananas and eating pizza. But you tend to do that, you tend to discuss. So there's that space as well, all right? Then we have what's called physical space. Physical space is the one that most of you are commonly are aware of. Physical space is the space around us and the way we use that space. And that's where movement becomes really important, because movement is physical, and that's very strongly linked to your physical space, right? Because how you use that space around you as an actor will determine what what the audience actually sees. So what portrayal you put forward will be exactly what the audience is going to see. Now, the thing about physical space, when you are looking at a script, you need to consider the physical space around the character. And obviously, physical space then lends itself to stage space as well. Okay, because depending on the amount of stage that you have to work with will depend on how much physical space you actually have. If you have a cluttered set, right? It's really cluttered set, like it's a real, 3 walls with an imaginary 4th wall, and there's lots of stuff, boxes and all sorts of stuff on the set. Your stage space is littered with obstacles, so your physical space is incredibly limited by what you can actually do, okay? Because that's your physical space. So you need to consider a character's physical space from that kind of point of view. But the physical space the character has to also work with is the other one, where in terms of their relationship with other characters. So just how close do I stand to another character's space? Am I in their space? Am I not in their space when I'm performing? When you're reading a script, you think, well, what distance is there between people? You guys read the conversation, right? Conversation is a room, a community hall, where, you know, you've got people sitting on chairs around each other, you know, like there's distance between them, right? What does that distance represent? The play they're looking at is a play called, well, I'll be looking at someone face to face, but they're three plays from a text called the Jack Manning trilogy. Now, Jack Manning is a community convener. And what a community convener is a person that is hired by the local council from government, and what their job is to bring people together that have had a particular type of criminal act has occurred in both their lives, and they tend to bring the people who did the act and their family, and the people who suffered from the act and their family, and they bring them together, and you have a facilitator, a community convener, and their job is to kind of like find a way through for these people and get them to make peace to a certain extent. All right, so that's their job. So what's conversation? Is that where the guy's trying to get out of jail? Is that where he raped her?
Yeah.
Yeah, in that one, they're trying to convince the family of the victim who was raped and killed to allow this person to, you know, get out of jail at their parole hearing. Right, so the community convener, what they do is they try to, you know, find a way through, you know, for these particular two families. So in terms of, you think about that, and in terms of physical space and the way it's used in that particular stage, the chairs are set up in a semicircle, obviously with the community convener in the middle and the people on the other side. Now, there's a lot of symbolism in the fact that the people are not sitting together, obviously, they're sitting apart, right? There's family on one side, there's a family on the other, there's a clear divide down the middle, you know, the convener's the divide, you know, so suddenly you start thinking about physical space and the way the stage is used. Right, and then you can sort of really come up with an idea of how space is working in that particular thing. Then, we talked about headspace. Don't forget the space, the headspace that a character has to bring to the actual performance itself. All right, to actually being on stage and what they need to do, right, how they need to behave. That's part of a character's headspace, is just that whole being able to be believable, being able to be convincing in the role, right? That's all part of that whole concept of space. So it's not just a word. There's a lot of things that branch off space. And whenever you read a script, you need to sort of sit back and sort of think, okay, well, what's going on with the space here? Okay? All right, obviously, you won't be able to get into an actor's headspace. It's just that you are, as long as you know that that exists. But you will be able to get into the character's headspace by reading the script and sort of coming up with a bit of an idea as to why the character is acting the way they're acting. Things that give you an indication as to what the character's headspace is usually character descriptions, right? And their status in the text. So, for example, if I take the role of Littlest Whimpers and we think about his space, his use of space, in terms of his headspace, character's headspace, he's full of, you know, anxieties, and he's full of, you know, hysterical moments, and he's full of like fear that he's got to go through this whole process. He's feeling very small in this world. He's very submissive, you know. So his status is very much reflected in his headspace and the way he uses his physical space. He's very small. He's very tiny. He seems to be small on stage. You know, when he grows as the play moves on, and his use of space grows, but everything about him is kind of, you know, his use of space is here. And you think the stage is this big, the stage is that big, but he is like this minor little person. So you can start to see how space starts to work. All right? Okay, so you guys got that? All right, okay, that's enough from me. Okay, now, it's got a...